morning. I'm Seth Levy, and I'm the head of engineering at Mudflap. And if you haven't heard of the company, we are the #1 app for truckers, commercial truckers, to get discounted diesel fuel. And prior to Mudflap, I had a number of engineering roles across startups in the Bay Area.
Hi, I'm Justyn Harriman, engineering lead for trust and safety at Nextdoor. If you don't know Nextdoor, it's a neighborhood network where you can connect to neighborhoods that matter to you so you can belong. Really focused on trust and safety, particularly fraud, misinformation, safety, since 2019 at Nextdoor.
Awesome. Well, so we're going to make this conversational. So we're going to present here a bunch of questions that each of us will chime in, but we'll obviously want to hear your questions as well on new approaches to user verification. So at the end of this, feel free to ask your questions. And let's go to the questions. So for both of you, what is the importance of a robust identity verification process for your businesses? I imagine that, well, your businesses are quite different, so there are different aspects and different impacts that a weak or strong identity verification process does to your business. So who of you would like to start?
Go first now.
All right. Sounds good. I'll go for it. Yeah. So, in any marketplace business, building that trust across the actors in your marketplace is essential. And so for us, that's the hardworking truckers who use our platform to get diesel discounts, and our truck stop merchant partners. That trust is what makes people feel comfortable leveraging your platform and willing to share the information, right, that's necessary to use that platform. At a more tactical level, if your platform is directly facilitating financial payments as we are, you have to worry about fraud all the time and keeping it below a certain threshold. And that identity verification process is really the critical first line of defense in minimizing fraudulent activity.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because they're so different. But at Nextdoor, so much of like what we do is like different from a lot of other social media apps. So if you think about Facebook, you think about Twitter, you have to like build a following, right? You have to find and connect to each individual person that you want to talk to. With us, you join, we're trying to connect you to your entire neighborhood, people you don't know. And so because of that, we have to like gate access to that, because as soon as you join, you can talk to 30,000, 40,000 people. It's a lot of people you get immediate access to when you join. So it's very important that when we join, we feel like, yeah, every person you interact with is a person in your neighborhood, is someone that you feel like you can connect with, that you can get that sense of belonging with. So it's very important to establish early on that, like, yeah, we feel like this is a real person with a real tie to the neighborhood.
Awesome. Well, one thing we know it's actually quite common in marketplaces is that bad actors, they tend to want to create multiple accounts, right? For different purposes, obviously, depending on the nature of the business. But one thing that's really common is, well, if that bad actor finds a vulnerability and is able to create more than one account, they'll do so, right? So I'd like to ask you, like, what is the impact of something like that to your business? Like in the case that bad actors are able to create these accounts at scale.
Sure, I trade off and yeah, okay. So like I mentioned, you have instant access to so many people to talk to. So if you can create multiple accounts, you can execute all the kinds of fraud that you normally see, like across like you just all the different types. So romance scams, car scams, like trying to get people to go off platform and pay eBay gift cards to have a car shipped to you, right? Because you have that instant access, like if you can create 1,000 accounts, 10,000 accounts, like you can cover a lot of people really quickly. Like you don't have to build the following. That's why it's like super important for us to solve that problem.
Yeah, so I'll come back to, for Mudflap, the minimizing financial losses as really a payments platform for the trucking industry. So it's oversimplifying, right? But if you look at kind of the metrics for loss from bad actors, you kind of have to look at, well, how many bad accounts are being opened up for a given period of time, and then on average, what are my losses per bad account? And anyone who's been involved in an e-commerce business knows this. But what's interesting is you can't really separate those two things. So I think the way that a lot of anti-fraud countermeasures start is with developing basic rule sets as you understand the nature of your business. I'm of course not going to reveal anything confidential here, but you can make some decent guesses in the trucking business. If our customer is a commercial trucker, right? They probably don't need to fill up 10 times per day. And if they're filling up at one truck stop on the East Coast, and then 2 hours later they're filling up at another on the West Coast, that's probably not a trucker, right? This is probably a bad actor of some form. So you develop rules to prevent those things, and as your business scales, those can get quite sophisticated. You can build custom models. But at the end of the day, none of those things really matter if the bad actors can simply create another account and try again, and just keep trying until they figure out how to defeat those rules. So really, the impact of multi-accounting is if you can't stop it, kind of the rest of your fraud prevention measures are just not going to be that effective.
Excellent. Well, and when it comes to solving that more specifically, what types of signals are you leveraging to detect when a bad actor, for example, is creating multiple accounts, and separate that bad actor from the good users, and also offer a seamless IDV process for the good ones?
Yeah, I think you touched on two kind of related but good points there. The seamless being a really important one. So for our customer base in particular, so it's a very mobile customer base, trucking, people on the go, minimizing friction is everything, right? So a traditional, right, KYC, KYB type process is just not going to work for this type of application. So we do collect some basic information at sign up, like most platforms do. So of course, since it's a commerce platform, right, you can't be completely anonymous. So we ask for an email address and a phone number. And there is utility still in those signals, right? You can verify phone numbers, but really the device telemetry, right, from the mobile device is critical in this process. So location, of course, being a big one, but also the notion, right, of device fingerprinting, right? Can I tell that this is the same device potentially being used across multiple accounts? So of course the beauty of those device signals is it doesn't create any extra hassle for the end user, right? It's just there, leveraged well, it lets you get the bad guys without inconveniencing the good guys, which of course is the key to any successful anti-fraud strategy.
Yeah, and what you're talking about, it's like in your context, it's like even more so for us, like focusing on reducing friction and making sure that any process that we run can work for anyone, right? Like when someone, obviously during account creation, you have very little information already on any platform. But for us, it's like, if we ask for too much, people disappear. Like they're not that invested in joining another social media app and giving their full ID, like social security number. Like obviously these things that we don't ask for, but like they're not going to do it. They're just going to leave. So we have to find a way to establish with very little information. Like we know they're creating accounts, like we only have so much. We need to establish like, yeah, this is likely to be a good user. They're likely to be a real person with that tie to the neighborhood we're looking for. And so like, yeah, obviously everything they provide, email, name, in our case, address is like very important and also something that's like natively tied into the app. But then finding ways to get that real person, real tie to the neighborhood connection in an efficient way. Sometimes it's something where we can tell that just from the information you provided in some device context. Other times we want to ask for geolocation, for phone number, etc. But gradually stepping up so that we don't ask too much, because at the end of the day, you're not going to give us that information just to use a social media app.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like doing this gradually makes it way more easier to the user, right? Instead of like asking everything at once, and maybe scaring away some good users just because they don't want to go through the whole process. Well, you both mentioned location, and obviously that's something very much related to what we do on our end. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on like how you're leveraging this and how your thinking has evolved on how to best use this type of signal for fraud prevention and trust and safety purposes.
Sure. I mean, first off, it's hard. I mean, you think about using geolocation in your everyday usage of all the apps across that are on your phone, but very few of those applications actually really need to have very secure understandings that you are actually, in fact, in this spot right now. So it's very hard. I mean, when we first started looking at this at Nextdoor, it was something where we're like, okay, we can build this in-house. We can think about how to like look over time about how people are interacting with the app, gain geolocation knowledge, and look at it that way. I mean, the problem is it actually becomes really hard to decide to kick someone off the platform, right? Like, especially for us, it's like, it's really hard once you're interacting, and we have to, if we don't have good signal, if we feel not confident in it, we have to have a very high threshold for saying like, yeah, this geolocation data doesn't make sense. So it's like, it kind of evolved over time thinking about how can we get secure access to geolocation data, have confidence that when we collect it from a device, it's real and is usable, so that we can establish it in very similar ways to what we do we did before, thinking about the email address, name, all those different things that go together. Like, we need to be able to do that securely, right? If it's spoofable, you can create thousands of accounts, and then, I mean, like we talked about, that has all the impacts on the business. Like, for us, that's really like brand impact, like people feeling like they can't come to Nextdoor and have a great experience because there's just so many fraudsters. Like, we don't want that. We want it to be a place where you can feel like you belong, and those are people that are real and near to you.
Yeah, I think, we could probably talk about this one for hours, but a couple high-level thoughts. So I think leveraging location data effectively does start with permissions, right? So, you have to show respect for your users and your customers, which is to say there has to be a value proposition. So you can't just ask people for their location because you want to fight fraud and improve your identity verification process. Even though your intentions are good there, right? The user has to be getting something in return for that, and that's easier in some businesses than others, right? If you're offering a location-based mobile service, it's a pretty safe bet that people are going to want to share their location in the first place. So I think it starts with that, right? Like, reasonably, what level of location data can you ask for? And even within that, it's not homogeneous in that there's always on location, right? You're getting location telemetry when your app is in the foreground. Even if you don't absolutely need location data, just sort of giving people the choice of turning it on or not for maybe some bonus functionality could be a useful signal in itself. Once your platform is at scale and you can kind of look at that data. But once you have that information and you can kind of get over that hump, I think the most basic usage, right, is just blocking actors that are not in your target market. And I mean, this has been a pattern for a long time. People used to do it with IP address-based geolocation, which is certainly not as reliable as GPS. So that's kind of table stakes, right? I don't operate in these countries, so let me block users in these countries. I think the next level is just doing hot spotting, right? You can look at your data set and figure out that fraudulent activity is occurring literally within these hotspots on the map, and you can detect when devices are in those locations and either block those transactions or accounts outright, or proceed to something like a step-up authentication if it's more in a gray area. We see elevated risk coming from this location, but maybe not 100%. Beyond that, I mean, the sky's the limit, right? You can start to try to build, more sophisticated models as you understand your user behavior better. But there's, you definitely don't have to start there. There's a lot of value to be had from kind of the couple strategies I mentioned, but before going there.
Cool. Well, a couple comments on my side here. First on permissions. We were actually quite surprised to see that even in other industries where there was no clear use case for geolocation, the opt-in rates were actually quite high. For example, within banking, right? We were starting to work with some banking clients, and we were concerned because at the time they were already asking for location permissions, but they had 15-20% of their users opting in. And what we did with them was we helped them basically define the messaging for the end user so that they would be very clear on why they're asking for this type of information. And basically the messaging was around reducing friction, right? So we're going to leverage geolocation to reduce the reliance on things like passwords and biometrics and two-factor authentication, et cetera, providing a much better user experience. And then the other argument was that this data was also being used to protect their accounts from account takeovers and impersonation and these type of things. And we actually saw the numbers going up from again, 15 to 20% up to 85% and more, right? So it's very relevant to really think through the messaging and understand how you're going to communicate that to the user, because if they perceive value in sharing this type of information, they will do so. The other thing is about spoofing, right? That's one of the biggest challenges when working with this type of information. Both operating systems, Android and iOS, have built-in features in which they allow a developer to test their apps as if they were in a different country. So for example, Justyn works in a global company, right? I'm pretty sure that there are different features for each market, but you're here in San Francisco, right? So how would you test your app if you're here but developing a feature for another market in Europe, for example, right? Well, you're not going to travel there just to test that new feature. Imagine if there is a bug and you need to fix it right there.
That'd be nice, but
yeah. So there is a feature that allows developers to actually do that type of testing. But unfortunately, bad actors are leveraging this as a security vulnerability to spoof GPS information, right? So if you go to the Google Play Store or the iOS App Store, and type fake GPS, for example, you're going to find hundreds of apps that enable you to spoof the GPS information quite easily. If you root your device or you jailbreak your device, it becomes even easier. So there are multiple ways in which a bad actor can spoof this type of information, right? So ensuring that you're understanding if the data is trustworthy is super important, because it's not just about asking the operating system where is this user at, if you don't have the controls to identify this type of spoofing. Otherwise, this data, instead of helping you, is actually going to hurt your business. So you got to be careful about geolocation spoofing particularly.
Yeah, I mean, none of these systems were designed to be secure, right? Like all of them were designed to give you application specific context, but not a context where you really were oh no, I prove I am here. We like to think that we open up apps and oh, you're in the wrong spot, you can't watch this show, right? But it actually isn't that hard to get around in many cases if you're using the most naive versions, because none of these systems, IP, not designed for that. The phone telling you it's not designed to do so securely, right? We've seen that all of those systems get exploited over time. For us, we see a lot of fraudsters who are very good at identifying oh yeah, my IP is very close to where this user lives, right? They have enough data to know that user is in that area and it's close enough. It's well, that does kind of look like you, right? So just a second. It's none of these systems were designed for this. You have to think about how to secure them, and it's a hard problem.
Well, and one of the things you touched on your previous answer was developing internally versus using an external signal. How do you guys balance this this decision about building in-house or using a platform?
Is it my turn?
Yeah, go for it.
All right, I'll go. Yeah, I'm pretty confident the answer is always both, and here's why. At least for any platform running at scale, fighting fraud is a problem of connecting the dots. And so you both have to have the dots and have them be reliable, and then of course you have to be able to draw insights right across those dots. And when you think of sort of the dots, right, some of them look very different. So there's location, and location in itself, right, is highly complex. There's spoofing. It's a large amount of data. The mobile telemetry. There's interpreting that data. Those types of things you can try to build internally, but it's probably not your core competency. I'm the head of engineering. I don't necessarily want to invest a lot of our internal bandwidth in building GPS based technology on mobile clients. So it's a great case of something that is likely better to go third party with, and that exists in other domains too, right? Payment method verification. There's a whole ecosystem. But what no vendor has, right, is your historical database of how your customers have behaved and transacted, in our case of being a payments oriented platform. And you get a huge amount of leverage when you can combine those two things, right? You get those third party signals using technology that you don't necessarily have, and then you can overlay it with sort of known good behavior patterns from your own user base, and the combination of those two things we found really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, the answer is always both. When I think about it, I think you mentioned core competencies. I think that's the key thing you have to decide is like, what is the thing you're going to become the best in the world at, right? Like what is that particular area that is related to your product and your data and what you have. That's the thing you should be building in-house all the time. Everything else you should think about, if it's not easy, think about how what other vendors you can use, right? And leverage and combine that data. Like you should be able to say, like, take information from any vendor that you work with and combine it with the data you have and what you're good at to answer the fraud problems, the trust and safety problems that you have. You have to decide what you know. Like for us, it's content. We know content pretty well. We understand that. We understand how it flows through the system. We don't understand geolocation very well. We work with other people on that. We don't understand, especially when people sign up early on, like what the full context of the identity. Like we don't have that behavioral data yet. We're still getting there. So it's something that we work with a lot of people to pull in, and then from that basis, establish good behavioral data so that you're a good actor on the platform and stay that way.
Awesome. Well, and then the AI question. So how do you guys think about the impact of these, particularly the large language models, on facilitating social engineering scams on your platforms, and how do you prepare for that?
I got fewer chuckles than I thought I was going to. Just because it's what everyone's talking about right now. Hype or not, it's just like it's what we have to think about. I mean, for us, it is something where a lot of the scams we see, a lot of the ones that are particularly hard for us to work with because they look so much like normal conversation anyway, are just going to get harder. So I think about romance scams. I think about people interacting one-on-one with each other, and just like how much cleaner that's going to be, how much easier it's going to be for fraudsters to build their teams. Like today, they kind of operate in so there's like a technical team, and then the people that just run the scams, right? With AI assistants, that team can get way more efficient, so their costs go way down, right? And it's hard to come back because like people talk about using AI to detect AI. It doesn't really work that well. Like it's not going to, because it's just hard, right? Because they start to communicate like humans do, and that's what they're good at, what they're going to be good at, right? I think that means that a lot of our focus, a lot of what we think about, especially in that world, is making sure that we have a real person behind these interactions. If you have a real person, like, yeah, I mean, they can defraud you. I mean, I have like individual local stories to like I can share about, like, you know, like a windshield or sorry, not windshield, a car headlight cleaning service where one person decided to like go after a competitor, but it's at the end of the day, it's one person, right? It's someone who really was dedicated to get past this, and in the platform scale, it's not as big an issue for us. We want to really avoid having a situation where you have tens of thousands of romance scammers on the platform. AI makes that hard. It's going to be really important to focus on making sure we have real people that are interacting with each other.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's not one I've thought about that much yet, but you know, I probably should be. So for us, of course, as we try to increase trust, minimize fraud on our platform, any system is going to make some errors, right? And one of the things we pride ourselves on is a great customer experience. So our customers can always call in. We have a telephone support team. We have chat, based support, email support, 24/7, right? And whatever your issue is, we'll resolve it. And for some small percentage of cases, right, you get false positives with your fraud and identity measures, and we're able to resolve those situations by asking some questions and figuring out, okay, we made a mistake here, and this is a trustworthy person who we'd like to be on our platform. That will get harder in the kind of large language model ChatGPT world. You can see bad actors ultimately being able to just have way more interactions with support teams and just try to kind of overwhelm in numbers those kind of manual verification processes, and so it'll definitely, I think, play into the overall mix, right? As other technical systems improve, it'll push kind of more inquiries out of band, and AI is something we'll have to contend with in those interactions.
Yeah, you're reminding me of the other thing I'm paranoid about. Support cases, and like working the support staff and using social engineering is going to be much easier to do too. Like if you have to not just be in product, you have to not just like solve things from the production system that you have. It's also the support system and how people interact with that we'll have to think about how to protect those agents from being defrauded. It's going to, again, this already happens. Like people already, like, we ban the account for fraud, they write back in, they convince someone to let them back on again. But again, it's going to be even easier, right? Because you can just automate it. You can lower your costs, which at the end of the day is how they think about it. They think about this as a business.
Exactly. Yeah, they'll be able to do a lot more. And going back to AI, like the other thing which is also challenging are the deepfakes, right? They're becoming way better. So like biometric verification is being challenged by these new technologies that are already being leveraged by fraudsters to bypass these type of verification. So something to keep an eye on as well.